All right. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about Betty Friedan's opening chapter from her book, The Feminine Mystique. The problem, it's actually called The Problem That Has No Name, and I always misremember it and write The Problem With No Name, but it's called The Problem That Has No Name, which is actually more grammatically correct than The Problem With No Name. Anywho, let's get into the overhaul argument. Oh, wait, actually, before we do, this link right here, which I'll also post down below underneath this video, is a link from the documentary series Makers, Women Who Make America, and it's on the housewife phenomena of the 1950s. And it's about 12 minutes long, and I really, really highly recommend that you watch it to get a sense of, to get a firsthand sense of what it was like to be a housewife in the 1950s, to live under that set of expectations, and what it meant for women in that time period, because that is the time period from which Betty Friedan is writing. So let's get into her overall argument. And some of this is from what you've read, and some of this is from just the broader project of the book, The Feminine Mystique. So in the book, she argues that a generation of earlier women, or an earlier generation of women, fought for the right for women to access jobs, education, and political leadership. But despite this, and keep in mind, she's talking about women in the 1920s. Despite this, the norms of today, of the 1950s and 60s, are constituted or sort of are aligned with the feminine mystique. And these emphasize feminine fulfillment as mothers and housewives as opposed to career women. So the prevailing cultural norms and pressures, according to the feminine mystique, the prevailing cultural norms and pressures consign women to the home. And in light of this consignment to the home, housewives across the country are experiencing a deep malaise and dissatisfaction with their lives, which is called the problem that has no name. Now, rather than blame women's discontent on women themselves, she blames this feminine mystique for disempowering women to engage in meaningful pursuits for themselves. The feminine mystique, she argues, is an impediment to women's inequality. So, what was it like to be a housewife? The problem that has no name describes the malaise born of being a housewife, a state one can connect, and that we should connect, to Beauvoir's concept of imminence. Friedan writes, women who suffer this problem, in whom this voice is stirring, have lived their whole lives in pursuit of feminine fulfillment. They are not career women. Rather, they are women whose greatest ambition has been marriage and children. For them, no other dream was possible. And indeed, we might say that in this culture of opportunities, that women are living the life of imminence, the life of, as Beauvoir argued, the brutish life of subjection to given conditions, to have, in other words, the terms of your life decided for you. So for these women, a given condition is that no other dream was possible besides the housewife. Women could only live out the opportunities made available to them and legitimized under the feminine mystique. So what was this feminine mystique? We can look at and consider it through the concept itself of the mystique, which we can define as an air of secrecy surrounding a particular activity or subject that makes it impressive or baffling to those without specialized knowledge. A fascinating aura of mystery, awe, and power surrounding someone or something. I like to relate the term mystique to the term mystify, mystification. To mystify something is to muddle the way it is appearing, muddle the truth of its order in order to make it appear differently. And some of the elements here of the mystique are inherent in Friedan's understanding of the mystique. So this idea that there's this kind of air of secrecy, of esotericness, of something ineffable around a thing like feminine comportment that makes it hard to understand for those who are not implicated in it. Okay, and and then this other definition, of fascinating aura of mystery, awe, and power. The mystique kind of projects itself as if this is the way things are supposed to be. It projects itself as, and that is a very powerful thing, right? It projects itself as the way the world needs to be, the way that we should be orchestrating our social relations in this case. So a mystique is it's kind of, I think, a hard thing for us to wrap our head around. But I think for Dan, what she's trying to do is not talk about mystique in general. She's trying to talk about mystique as it applies to the feminine subject. And here, what she's getting at is this idea about women, that there is something special about being a woman, some special feminine quality. And the special feminine quality is roughly one that has to do with women's place as nurturers, as caretakers, as loving, as sacrificial, as basically upholders of the hearth, right, of the home. And what the mystique does for Friedan is, by saying that there's just something special about women and this special thing consigns them to the place in the home, what's actually happening is a profound mystification of women's relegation to the home through a particular social construction of gender. So to go back to our work from last week, we can see in the mystique a construction of gender, a construction of women, okay, as existing or expressing themselves in some certain way that has to do roughly with their place in the home and their place as loving, nurturous figures in society. So to get at this a little further, I will read her definition of mystique and of the feminine mystique from chapter 2, called The Happy Housewife Heroine, which is the chapter after the chapter that we've read for today. The feminine mystique says that the highest value and the only commitment for women is the fulfillment of their own femininity. It says that the great mistake of Western culture through most of its history has actually been the undervaluation of femininity. I want to just stop here and focus in on that, because what is actually happening in the norms that arise from the mystique, or the mystique as norms, is not that women are inferior to men, but the idea that women and men are equal but different, right? So we can go back to Judith Lorber and that idea of segregation and how important that is to mark gender differences between people, and how that segregation of how saying that something is not like the norm often results in a sort of subordination or inferiorization or subjugation of the thing that is not like the norm. So the mystique, according to Friedan, says that the men and women are different, and that the special qualities of women make them specially prepared to carry out certain roles in society that men are not as attuned to. And this is to read on. It says this femininity is so mysterious and intuitive and close to the creation and origin of life that man-made science may never be able to understand it. Okay, so what she's getting at there, this idea of the aura, an aura, a fascinating aura around the women. Women just magically create life, right? And they just create life and then they nurture it, and will never be able to repeat the amazing, wonderful things that women do, okay, with respect to home life. But however special and different the mystique says, woman is in no way inferior to the nature of man. It may even in certain respects be superior. And in fact, often this is the way that women and the work they do can be talked about. What they do is different than what men does. And in fact, actually, what they do is more important. Of course, if it was so important, then why doesn't it result in the individual enfranchisement of women? That is going to be Friedan's point. The mistake, says the mystique, the root of women's troubles in the past is that women envied men. Women tried to be like men instead of accepting their own nature, which can find fulfillment only in sexual passivity, male domination, and nurturing maternal love. So ultimately, for Friedan, the mystique is a set of norms and norms arising from those norms that relegate women to certain roles in society, that say those roles are important, but don't enfranchise them, that say those roles are important, but don't resource them except through a man and through dependence on a man, and that valorize ostensibly nurturing maternal love, while at the same time also creating a society where those same qualities, well, okay in a woman, are belittled when apparent in a man, precisely because that is men acting feminine, which is to say to act inferior. So the mystique is doing a lot of work in Friedan's theory. And one of the things that it's doing the most is it's telling women to exist in a certain way. First of all, it's telling women that they cannot be career women, that they should not be interested in community outside the home, that they should not have a mind of their own, but instead more of a childlike dependence on the man. And that they should be fully and 100% invested in the notion of togetherness, okay? Their self-value should be derived from the things they do for other people. The woman, it is said under the mystique, has no independent self to hide even in guilt. She exists and should only exist for and through her husband and children. Now, for Beauvoir, and also for Friedan, we saw that the state proper to women is one of transcendence, a life in which one has and is able to exercise their will, to engage in freely chosen projects, to live as a free and autonomous being, to decide the terms of one's life. Well, Friedan emphasizes that such a state is denied to women under the feminine mystique, that is denied to women when they are just housewives. But where is the world of thought and ideas, the life of the mind and the spirit, she asks us, such a life? Forbidden to join man in the world, can women even be people? Okay, and Friedan's central argument is that under the mystique, women cannot be people, okay, in the same sense that men are, and that this is what gives rise to this malaise, this effusive malaise, described as the problem that has no name. So to recap her argument, the feminine mystique dictates that women's special qualities are best expressed in their work in the home. This confinement to the home, a state of immanence, has created the problem with no name. And the feminine mystique is an impediment to not just women's equality with men, but also women's flourishing, their transcendence. And with that, we'll leave it at that. Thank you.